Okay, we are live now. Let me pull up a chat room just to see if anybody jumps in there, because this was an unannounced show.
Okay.
But I need to record it live because Justin TV actually records the show for me, so I don't have to record it locally. So,
Okay.
1 second here.
And you're using a tool called bennycams.com?
Minicam, yeah. That's what I'm using to send you the video.
Okay. Because it shows up on the bottom of my screen.
Yeah, I kept it on there because it's free, so I'm just going to give him credit.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready to start?
Yep.
Okay, let's do a level check real quick. Can you do a check 1, 2, 3?
Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. How are you today?
Okay, good. Here we go. Welcome to My Hard Drive Died, episode number 14. My Hard Drive Died is a show which we actually haven't done in a while. We'll try to remedy that. Where we talk about hard drives and basically have the world's eminent hard drive expert, Scott Moulton, come on and just talk about so much, give you so much information about hard drives, how to fix them, things that could go wrong with them, how they're constructed, the new technology, that it will blow your mind. I guarantee it. Let's introduce the man right now. Hey, Scott, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. Doing great, actually.
It's good to talk to you again.
I know. I miss you.
Yes. Yeah, it's I think we did one at the beginning of December, but or somewhere around there. But yeah, it's been a little bit more than a month since we've done one.
Yeah, we'll keep doing them. We'll get them out.
Yes.
We'll get them out as we can.
Yeah, it's obviously with the travel schedule and, things out of town, it's a normal thing for me to try to, get on when I can, as soon as I can. And I've got some upcoming announcements and stuff that I can talk about too that are coming up in March.
Oh, good.
Um,
Why don't we go right into that then?
okay, all right. Well, a friend of mine and me put on a conference here in Atlanta that's called Outer Zone. And so Outer Zone is going to be March 19th. So basically it's the 18th and the 19th. We actually have kind of a get together on the 18th, and then on the 19th we actually have talks. But it's in Atlanta. We rent a hotel that's near the airport, and we have a 1 day conference. Basically, it's a donation con. Basically, you don't have to pay anything to go. You can just come. So I'll be giving a talk on hard drives there, obviously. So anybody that wants to come and see anything about hard drives, that's the day to come. So March 19th, you can go to outerzone.org, and we're going to start putting the information up there. The only thing is, zone is spelled with a 0 instead of a O. So it's outer zone, ZONE.org.
Gotcha. And where is that again? What city?
It's in Atlanta. It's right next to the airport. So off of Virginia Avenue, there's a hotel that we rent there called Wesleyan Inn. And they have 2 rooms, so we can have a game room, and we sell T-shirts and a bunch of other things as well. And then there's a room that holds about 100 people to actually do a conference so that everybody can do talks. And we'll have about 8 to 10 speakers that particular day.
Oh, cool. Are you going to cover anything specifically about hard drives, or just a general talk?
I have this talk that I just did at Shmoocon this weekend, which was jammed right up on basically my development stage, trying to get the items developed and getting them done. And so basically, I'm going to be improving this one, adding some more content that is related to flash animations and things like that on hard drives. And I try to animate the entire talk. And right now, I've got about 6 minutes of animation in my current talk. And it took every day pretty much since December 5th or so to render these animations to get what I actually just added into these talks for Shmoocon, and it finished like Wednesday night. So I will be adding more content between now and then, and so I will do an enhanced version of this talk, which was it's about spindle replacement, bearing replacement, fluid dynamic replacement, that kind of thing for repairing hard drives.
Ooh, that sounds pretty
Right.
meaty.
Yeah, there usually is a good selection of speakers. A lot of people who've been to cons know a guy named Billy Hoffman. Usually he does one. on web development and some web content. There's a couple other really good speakers. There'll probably be something on IP version 6 also at this one. So it's usually a really good gathering of 100 people or so.
Sounds like fun. So outerzone.com, right?
Outerzone.org.
Outerzone.org, Z0NE.
Right, that's correct.
Hey, why did you render? You must have rendered that on a Mac, didn't you? That's
actually, it was not rendered on a
Really?
Mac. We used 4 anywhere between i5 and i7 machines.
Are you
Some of them are 5 cores. Yeah, it takes roughly what you're looking at when you're doing rendering for animations. And if anybody's seen my previous, I have 4 or 5 animations that I've done that are like full 1-hour talks. Basically, what ends up happening is it takes 1 minute per a single frame in order to render. So even if you throw 4 or 5 machines at it, you're actually rendering 1 frame per minute. And it takes 30 frames per second in order to actually have a second of animation. So for every second you need, it's 30 minutes rendering time.
Dude,
and
that can't. I mean, it's not a standard. What resolution are you rendering at? Are they?
We were doing it. Yeah, we were doing it at 1024.
Okay.
And we were using Cinema 4D, which is a high-end package for producing movies and things like that. And yeah, pretty much everything that we've done, even over the last 3 or 4 years when I did all the other animations, it pretty much worked out to, a minute and a half per a frame for us to render this. And so the best thing you can do is distribute it across multiple machines. So every single, because we're also rendering shadows and resolution, changes in angles and cameras, and so there's a lot to it. And you can see it as we showed some today. But basically, what ends up happening for 6 minutes of animation in this particular one, that's 10,800 frames. So that's roughly 180 hours of rendering time. And that's if you don't make a mistake. If you don't say, hey, there's something wrong with one of these frames and I need to replace it. So when you've got to go back and try to weave them together and repair some of these frames to make an animation, it's a tremendous undertaking. And then you have to go through the whole process of integrating them together, weaving them together so that they make sense and put them off in one particular thing.
That's hardcore. With these machines were probably sweating for weeks. Did they live?
They did live, but yes, it was pretty rough.
Okay.
There were times, they crashed or bombed or, there was too much going on, but it was a pretty stiff undertaking. And I wasn't able to bind them together like I did in my previous animations. We actually wrote before in my previous 4 or 5 full animations, we wrote our own framework for Flash. And so Flash would actually be the player and it would do the whole thing, and we would have them scripted inside of ActionScript to actually make these things play it on certain frames.
I see.
This time we used Adobe Captivate basically, and we put them all together in Adobe Captivate. And because it was only 6 minutes and I'm giving a 50-minute talk, I also used some development pictures inside of it to show during me repairing this hard drive what I'm actually doing and what those parts physically look like. And so Shmoocon was the first place that I presented it this past weekend in Washington, D.C. So the slides and the videos are going to go up here shortly. The only downside is I did all this work, and I have a associate of mine. His name's Michael Tilson, who does most of the modeling, does all the animation, did the rendering, and put all this stuff together for me. Ultimately, we did all this work. And at Shmoocon, while it's a great con and everything, this particular time I got some of the crappy projectors, the ones that are darker, and the slides kind of didn't look so great on the video. So yeah, there was a lot of complaints from that standpoint. They're really bright on the screen. You'll see them when you actually show some animations here, or when we actually post the slides up online. They're bright, they're clear, they're colorful. But the projectors at Shmoocon this time were kind of pathetic. They weren't the best.
No, they look fantastic. I've seen them. They look great.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Thank
it's a shame the projectors bombed over there.
Yeah,
but
it happens.
Yeah, sucks. At least you have them done and created, and you could distribute them at other conferences and different places.
Yeah, it'll grow as time goes on, and we'll expand this material. This was the maximum I could do. I thank Shmoocon for having me back. I've been there. I've given 4 or 5 speeches now. And I love Shmoocon. It's one of the best conferences, and certainly is one of the better put together, more professional conferences I've been to. So I'm happy to have been there. Next time, hopefully, I'll just get the brighter projectors.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
What did you want to go over today, Scott?
Well, basically, I've spent the last 3 months or so kind of developing this process for rebuilding these platters that I presented at Shmoocon. I have also done some other work. Last week, there was the DoD, Department of Defense, cybercrime conference here in Atlanta. So I did some new material and did some diagnostic stuff for that cybercrime conference. So one of the first things I did was I developed this new flow chart, basically, which is kind of a mapping of my mind to try to show in a diagnostics mode when you're starting to go through hard drives how you progress and think through these things. So up on my website, there is a link to this, which most people also notice. I have a new website.
Let's check it out. Let me show it right now. I think it's fantastic, man. Who made that logo? I love it.
I hired a developer in Australia, and we worked on it for about 2 or 3 months simultaneously while I'm doing all this other stuff. Basically, my goal this time, I had a pretty ugly website before.
Yeah.
We focused a lot on being able to do, Twitter and LinkedIn and, Facebook links and things like that. So there's bars down there. Everything is database now. That was one of the things. My old site was really becoming very difficult to maintain because things were, updated basically in the page. So this is all done physically in Drupal now. So everything's in a database. I can do blog postings. So the menu bar now is changed to reflect that. So now you'll actually see on the menu bar we have the blog postings. There's the presentation page is better, and now the individual items can be added in the presentation page. And so the presentation page is kind of the meat and potatoes right now of the free material. I certainly have other stuff there that's for pay, but on the presentation page, this is pretty much all the free stuff. So as you scroll down through this page, you'll see I've got links. Like one of the things is all my previous presentations and source material and stuff for the talks I give it away for free. So there's a link on that page that says that it's to the files. So there's basically a My Hard Drive Died files area now that basically dumps to an FTP site. And you can go ahead and pull that. So it says My Hard Drive Died File Resources, and there is a spot right there where you can click on it, and it'll take you to hundreds, if not, thousands of megs of files that are there from previous stuff that I've done.
Damn, guys, get that while you can.
Yeah, it's hopefully it'll be there for a while. Right now I'm hoping that GoDaddy doesn't, beat me down too much on my bandwidth. And then also you'll also see the advanced slides and the advanced content that I did for the DoD last week. It's right under the recent content / talks. There's two items that are underneath there, underneath the YouTube channel, which one of them is the advanced diagnostics speech slides and then the flowchart itself. And so you can click on those and download the flowchart and the slides. Now the flowchart, as you are displaying now, basically the flowchart goes through from the beginning to the end, just kind of the different problems that I run into when things aren't working. The goal for the flowchart and for those particular slides is to stop people from just massively trying to rip apart the drive and replace parts. This has become much more common now for people to go, hey, look, I just want to, take this board off and swap it or do something else with this board. And it's not always the case. It's not always something that you have to replace. There could be some sectors that are actually in error. There could be some other problems. But there's 4 basic things that you're looking for there whenever you're trying to do data recovery, that even if those 4 things come up, basically you could possibly have access to the data, even though you might not be seeing it. Maybe you need some other equipment or there's a firmware problem. But in those instances, changing out equipment is probably not going to help you. So typically what you're looking for would be model number, serial number, geometry, and, for the drive to come ready, basically. And I go through the process of describing that in the slides and how a drive actually comes ready, how you can tell when it's ready. Because really the drive can respond and give you a ton of diagnostics information. And actually on every single sector actually has a breakdown inside the sector of how to reply and tell you an error code. But none of the software and none of the devices that we have out there that are just public domain devices, in other words, Windows and Linux and a lot of the other tools, don't display any of that content. Even diagnostics tools, when you get to the microscope, I bought a tool called Microscope or some other package out there. They don't display those error codes. So typically, when you're getting to some software like, HD Guru has MHDD, and there's Victoria, and there's a couple of other tools out there that will actually display those diagnostics codes, when the sector is actually responding, and you can see that content. So you'll know, oh, yes, I know this type of error that I have. And so basically, my goal here was to try to acknowledge the fact that not everything just needs to be replaced. And ripping off a board isn't necessarily going to do you a lot of good in some cases if you don't know what you're looking for.
Right.
So it's all about understanding these basics.
Yeah, this is great. It's going to help out a lot of people. I mean,
Thank
it is, because problem is when guys run into hard drives, they don't necessarily know what's wrong with them. I mean, there's some very obvious symptoms, like, you have on here the flow chart. You hear noises scraping, for example. Well, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? So the flow chart at least directs you to the right place and gives you the right steps what to do. Man, this is really cool.
Right. I mean, most of the time these days, some of the biggest things I run into are two things. One is that obviously the new Seagate hard drives that are 7211 and above, 7212, that those have firmware problems, and those have things that exhibit a problem that looks similar to a board problem or head problem, but may not be a board problem or head problem just because of these, particular firmware problems. And almost all drives, you could open the lid and look at something, so if you heard a scraping noise or there was something else, you could open the drive and you could look at it and you would know, what your condition is. Basically, is the platter scratch, the head damage, except for Western Digital hard drives. Western Digitals have a screw that's mounted to the head assembly, and when you remove this screw, it causes the head to wobble back and forth, and it basically causes an alignment problem. And now you can no longer tell whether or not you had a board problem or some other problem that was unrelated to this particular problem just because you've had a screw that you've removed. So I'm trying to at least make sure people understand. I've done this in some other talks and pushed the other information, but don't remove the screw in the lid of a Western Digital drive. Anything else you can look at, just not that one.
Yeah, we talked about that before. That's one screw could just mess up the whole works.
Right, exactly. So that's in the flow chart, basically. That's some of the content that basically, like, stop here. You can go in a different direction, or there are times obviously that everything's not do it yourself, or if you're going to do it yourself, it's going to require some equipment that may be more expensive than you want to use yourself.
Right.
So, but I've progressively gotten more and more people who are interested in doing data recovery as a business or a lifestyle. And so from that perspective, teaching the classes and going down that path, there are some do-it-yourselfers out there who are being creative in their processes of building stuff and kind of innovation. I've seen, more innovation than usual from that perspective. So I'm trying to help those people out now as well, the people who want to learn it, even it goes as far as, FBI, CIA, or a couple of other people that have been in my class from that perspective, that there may be content that they want to learn, and they may have the money to buy certain tools, but they need to know which ones they are and why you want to buy this tool.
Right. No, it's an expensive, undertaking to really get these things fixed. Like, to be able to fix them no matter what the problem is, it could cost some bucks. I mean, I've seen the equipment that you use, so any guerrilla methods would be, great if they're dependable and work.
Right. It's all about the knowledge. It's all about knowing what you have to do at that particular juncture without making a mistake. And that's typically where things go wrong with hard drives, is you're taking something that's complex. If your car didn't start one day, a lot of people would just say, oh, let's go rip out a carburetor, or if the car even has a carburetor anymore. But, but you get the point. It's, they're not just going to rip parts off and replace them. So basically I'm just trying to, not that ripping parts off and replacing them might work in some cases. There are some boards and some drives that do work with that.
Right.
But it does help to have a better knowledge of which ones those are and where you're going to stand once you actually do the rebuild.
Absolutely. It's great stuff.
Thank you. So,
what else do you want to go over?
Well, the next thing I did was basically Shmoocon, basically going to Shmoocon. It's in Washington, D.C. And so this particular talk that I did at Shmoocon, which I believe you have some of my animations you can kind of show, and I can kind of, hit that from that perspective and show some of the basics. Sure. We had a tool that we could use to remove platters when we had a frozen motor. So basically, when the spindle locks up, we had a tool that's called an HPE, so it's a hard disk platter extractor. And we could take these platters and we could remove them from a drive and put them on another drive, another motor. And so that's kind of where we're starting with this, is that this tool no longer works on certain new hard drives that we have. There's now these spacers, these black spacers that basically sit around the outside edges of the platters, and it stops us from using this tool. And there wasn't a lot of easy ways to get around this. There wasn't a lot of easy ways where we could, cut these off. At one time when they were plastic, you could kind of use like a hot wire, cut them off and do something else with it. But not anymore. Basically now we're dealing with some stuff that might be, excuse me, that we might have metal ones that we're going to have to deal with. So these metal ones, the next slide shows the metal ones.
Is that it there?
No, that particular one's plastic. That one right there, the silver ones, those are metal. And so we can no longer just cut those off and continue on trying to rebuild the drive. So we've had to find a new way to remove these without doing any other damage to either the platters, the heads, or the drive in order to get to at this point, basically what we're looking at is there's bearings inside the drive. And these particular ones are called fluid dynamic bearings. And we can replace that particular core of the bearings, and then the platters will be able to spin and we'll be able to get the job done. However, you can't take off each platter individually because they're sequenced and they're aligned with the platters below them.
Right.
So if we could have taken them off one at a time, that would be an easy job. You take off the top one, then you take off the spacer that's in between it, then you take off the next platter, and so on and so on.
Right.
So since we can't do this, we have to figure out a way to remove those platters, keeping them in line, and popping this other piece out.
You're keeping them in line you have to still do it one at a time, but you got to keep them in line.
No, now you will remove the entire set together.
Uh-huh.
So now the hard disk platter extractor that we had before also did that. It removed them all together, kept them bound together. The difference is it took the platters off the spindle. In this particular case, we're going to take the spindle off of the bearings, and we're going to replace the bearings. So if you progress, you'll see that this is what our goal is now. This device that's sitting in the middle is basically what we're looking at here is a picture of the top of the spindle, and it's being surrounded by the fluid dynamic bearings, which are encased in basically a kind of like a metal sheath, and there's a pole that basically goes up through the bottom of it. So this is basically the patent for this submission. And in the middle, you can see that there's these grooves that go around in the middle around the sheath that's around the pole. And these grooves are very, very important for fluid dynamic bearings. There's a difference between fluid bearings and fluid dynamic bearings. And one of those items is that the fluid bearings, basically whatever you have is submerged in this fluid, and that the fluid basically is there all the time. In fluid dynamic bearings, you have a situation where the fluid sits in another location and it's basically sucked up into the sheath itself and then surrounds the pole in order to keep the pole going. So you have to have your fluid bearings around your pole.
Huh.
So if you progress a little bit out, on the slides, basically you can see this is the goal. This silver item with the post through the middle is what we're getting to. So for the people who don't necessarily see slides or something like that, you can go to a website and see them. But basically there's this pole that goes through the middle of a cylinder, and this pole is basically what is lubricated internally. And this is basically the device that we're looking for. Now, my goal for this particular talk, there are tools that are out there. I've seen several tools, and they're typically fairly expensive, several thousands of dollars, if not greater than that. I've seen them as high as $6,000 to $10,000 for tools to remove the bearings. And my problem with this is that removing the bearings is one of kind of the smallest piece of one of the jobs that we have. And I'm not trying to diminish its importance here because it's a very difficult task, but it doesn't solve any of our other problems. It doesn't solve our head problems or anything else that we already have, our alignment issues. We still have to do all that work ourselves, just like we did before. And so we had a very inexpensive piece to remove the platters, and this particular $6,000 or higher tool would basically remove, the cost that we had of the smaller, least expensive tool. So now it becomes the most expensive device in our arsenal.
Yeah, but Scott, so you're basically trying to pull that pole out of this bearing, and you need a $6,000 tool to do that.
No, what you're looking at is the entire set. That's the bearing.
Okay.
That you're not trying to pull the pole out of it. This particular container, basically, with the pole going up through it, is the bearing.
I see.
And that's what we're trying to remove from inside of the sheet that's around it. Basically, we have a spindle that sits over it that basically the platters are mounted to. And so this piece is captured between the solid component of the base of your hard drive, when you flip it over and you see a little hole that's a circle, and the top. And I have pictures of it coming up, but basically that's what we're looking at.
Gotcha.
Is that this piece is captured between the base of the metal of your drive and the spindle component where the platters are actually mounted to.
Gotcha.
And we're going to need to remove this piece and replace it, and then realign everything, put it all back in.
Okay. You want me to hit the next? You direct me with the next slides.
Yeah, go ahead. Go. So basically, my talk at Shmoocon was basically about going through how the bearings work, because I do a little bit more on the education part. You can keep hit and play, basically. So I'm trying to show what the inside of this particular cylinder looks like. And so I'm trying to do an educational component so people understand why it's locking up. Now, there's this pole that basically goes through the middle of the cylinder, and underneath it there's a small ring of copper that's mounted to this pole, and then there's a cap on the bottom to hold it in. And so that's basically where the fluid is sitting. And so once it starts to spin up, then the fluid is moved up the post by some grooves that are cut in a particular pattern inside of the cylinder. So you can advance. So this is what it basically looks like inside. Once I break this apart, the copper piece, the bottom, and basically I tore this whole one up. I beat the crap out of this one to get it out.
Looks
So the post is, this was actually frozen. You could not move this post in the middle. This is what actually allows the platters to spin. And so what's basically happening is that some of the fluid is not being distributed, or it's overheating in certain places, causing it to lock up, which actually then kind of grips it inside of the cylinder. You can hit advance. So this kind of horrible slide that you're looking at was basically to show that prior to like 2005 or so, most of the drives had ball bearings in them.
Mm-hmm.
And basically you can see the two balls at the top slide, the two pink dots that are in pairs on the bottom and the top.
Right.
And those pink balls, basically, there's the problem with bearings. And bearings, as these balls are spinning around in a track that basically goes around the device, it allows the thing to spin. Well, the problem with bearings is that they're kind of somewhat oblong, or as they heat up, they change shape, and you start having all kinds of problems. So people have seen seized motors before with bearings. And so the whole point is to get away from bearings and move to fluid dynamic bearings, because they're faster, they support more speed, and they have a little bit better chance of not heating up and doing some of the same things that the ball bearings themselves did. So that's basically a problem. The product that basically IBM was showing on the bottom, which is the fluid dynamic bearings themselves. You can advance.
Okay.
And so I have an animation that's basically showing a cutaway of how this post in the center of the cylinder of the fluid dynamic bearings can overheat, and then it basically seizes. So this cutaway, basically, it'll just turn redder and redder until basically the post expands to the point that it actually seizes inside of the drive. Advance.
And that's because of fluid not getting to it properly?
Yes, it can be for a couple of things. These grooves right here, where you're actually looking at this particular picture, this one actually shows some grooves that are cut inside the cylinder. And so what happens is fluid dynamic bearings has a lot of math behind it, behind how these grooves work, how the oil itself is actually going to be moving up the shaft so that it actually creates amount of pressure. And I kind of equate it to the same thing as like an egg, that if you applied pressure, it's equal amounts of pressure all the way around the egg, that it basically won't crack, because you create enough pressure inside the egg equally in all the positions that it doesn't crack. And that's basically what's looking at here in this post, is basically that the fluid dynamic bearings, when they're equally distributed, it actually is lubricating and withstanding the pressure. But in the next slide, if you look at the next slide, you can see these grooves that are cut that basically cause the fluid to move. And then as it's rotating, it kind of makes a wormhole or whatever you want to call it, a whirlpool as it goes up the shaft and keeps it lubricated. But it also creates pressure and controls the heat as it's going through this particular process. So on the next slide, there'll be a breakdown of what the heat looks like as it's going around in this tube, and you can see how the grooves are angled and what it actually causes for the heat in these particular grooves. So there's actually pressure that's equally displaced around the entire tube to keep this at the right position, in the right lubrication, and the right amount of pressure. And so I want people to keep in mind that this fluid, basically, as your drive is off and it sits there, that the content basically will kind of seep down to the bottom again, and it'll be sitting at the bottom waiting for it to spin up so that it can actually cause the fluid to go back up the shaft. So if it's cold outside and you have your hard drive in the trunk of your car, or your laptop in the trunk of your car, and you bring it in and you immediately turn it on without waiting for it to heat up from a frozen temperature or something, it may affect how thick this fluid is, which is essentially ester oil, which is something that's kind of like what you put in your car, Penzake or something like that. So this fluid, you have to kind of keep in mind that this is also affected by temperature, and it may cause you physical problems, may cause your drive to seize or cause other problems with your drive, because metal contracts as it's cold, and the fluid contracts and gets thicker based on temperature. So there's a lot of these things that make a difference to the drive, and you've got to take those into account, which is what I'm basically trying to document so that people can understand why they seize. And it's gotten progressively worse as platters have gotten heavier, and there's more platters around the spindle. And so you're putting a lot of pressure on these, this pin in this area. And I've seen them snap off. I've seen them twist. I've seen them just lock down. And once that happens, this is a very, very difficult task to replace. And up until now has been very expensive to do. I've basically come up with a way to do this with parts from a second hard drive and do it for less than $100.
Wow. That is amazing.
It's
first of all, I got just a couple questions up to this point, and then we'll talk about that, because that sounds killer. How many drives now are using the fluid bearings? When did they stop using ball?
Basically, you're looking almost all of them after 2005 have started going to fluid bearings. There's some instances before that, but it's generally 2005 and on, bigger, smoother. I mean, and you'll see it on the box. They were originally advertising a lot. It was a big deal because you basically lose all the sound. You have about 4 decibels in sound that it drops. So your drives are a lot quieter, and that's what people want, is quieter drives. So ball bearings are a thing of the past, and they're hard to manufacture. Ball bearings are hard to align, and they have to be a perfect quality in order for them to work, and they wear out faster. In this particular case, again, most of the problems that I'm seeing are primarily because fluid bearings, their platters are heavier, they can bend a little bit more, somebody dropped it over, and even a small drop might cause enough of this post to bend a little bit when it hits the table or something.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool invention. I mean, they seem to be nicely suited for hard drives. Now, you said you found a way to fix these and replace them for under $100?
Yeah, it'll take you, probably using kind of my method here that I'm describing in these videos, and especially in these slides. You have to basically practice, and it'll take you about 6 hours of practice to kind of get it down. If you basically follow what I have here as kind of the guide, it will solve a lot of problems, and maybe people can improve upon what I've actually chosen, because I'm looking for things. I didn't go down the street and mill some parts, because I could have done that, and I could have been a lot more fluid with what I'm doing here. It could have been a lot better selection of tools that I could have made.
Yeah, but more expensive for us.
Yeah, more expensive, and not easily something that just anybody could have done.
Right.
So if you're in the middle of Utah and you want to figure out how to replace these bearings, you could spend a day practicing and making your own tools basically out of another hard drive, and you could make this work. And it's worth doing if you're going to do this a lot in the future. Definitely.
So how do you do it?
Okay, well, if you want to go to the slide, so hit advance.
Here we go.
So this is basically kind of the overview of what I'm doing. I'm taking another drive that I've carved the pieces out of. And one of the biggest pieces that I had a problem with was trying to find a cylinder that was the right size so that I could actually put this into what's called an Arbor Press. You basically have to break this bottom piece free so that you can actually get the platters to fall out, and then you have to flip it over and do the reverse. And so basically what we're trying to do is get this particular piece, this one piece, out of the middle of a bad drive and replace it with a good one. So there's some redundancy here because you basically have to do this process 3 times. And so to get it down, you're going to do one that's going to be, I'm going to take a bad drive that either doesn't work or does work, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to basically tear it apart and get the parts out of it and use those parts. And then the second one's going to be, I'm going to remove the spindle from the bad hard drive, the client drive, the one that has the data on it that I want. I'm going to remove the bearings from this drive. And then I'm going to go to another good working drive. I'm going to remove the bearings from that drive, and I'm going to put them in this one that has the client drive in it. So I'm going to replace them.
Okay.
So those are kind of the steps I'm going to go through. And so if you go back to the slides, I'll advance. So go ahead. And so this is basically still in the overview mode. Basically, I'm going to use this drive, and I'm going to use the bottom of the drive as a tool to help remove by using what's called a drift. I'm going to punch the center pin out of the center of the platters without touching the platters or doing anything to it. So it does require, you to practice a little bit and try to get some good skills here. If you advance, I'll show the real pictures and the real drive as we're stepping through it.
What's this blue machine here? That's just a press?
Yes, it's basically an Arbor Press.
Okay. It's
about $45, $50 at Harbor Freight, or if you can find a local shop, maybe an Ace or something like that.
Okay.
It's an Arbor Press. I'm using a 1-ton Arbor Press.
Okay.
And there's several different models that are made all the way up to 2 tons and 3 tons, and sometimes they're used for cars or parts or pistons and things like that. So you ought to be able to find an Arbor Press. It's basically manpower. You're basically pulling on a pole that's attached to a gear, and the gear pushes pressure down on an arm. And so what you're looking at now is the bottom of the hard drive. And so you've seen this silver component before on the bottom of your drive. This is basically where this bearing is, and it's epoxied in. You can see this epoxy around it.
Right.
And basically it takes about 1 ton of pressure to break this thing free of that center pin. So this is what I'm trying to do. Now the problem is I needed something that's exactly the same size to punch this thing out.
Right.
So what I did was I took another drive and I just beat the crap out of it because it's chicken and the egg. You don't already have one to use, so I need to get one out of another drive.
Right.
So I actually just used a punch and a hammer, and I banged on it until I got one of these free. And so once it's physically free and I've got it out of the drive, then these are the platters I don't care about, so I can just kind of bang through the drift with a pin on the top and knock this piece out. And I'm going to use this as a spacer, basically, to put it in the right location. So if you advance from this slide, this is what it looks like after I've knocked the crap out of one and it falls out.
Okay.
The ring that's around it, basically you'll see the ring around the outside edge and it's black. That's actually the magnet. And the magnet actually is the piece that when it sits over the inside the drive, there's a coil. And the coil that it's sitting over, when you apply electricity to it, basically causes it to spin.
Right.
And so that's the magnet part. And you're going to try to break it free, obviously, without smashing this magnet on your client drive. But that's one of the pieces that you can actually do. So this is it upside down with the space. Now, if you see the next slide, if you hit the next slide, this is what it looks like on the top. And this pin is basically just jammed in there. This is the center pin that goes all the way through the cylinder inside the fluid dynamic bearings. So we're going to knock this out with something called the drift. We're going to pick one that's exactly the size of the circle itself, and we're going to put it over it. We're not going to use a punch because we don't want to damage it or mushroom it. I'm just going to use a drift, and I'm going to bang it out or use the Arbor Press to push it out.
Okay.
So you hit the next button. So this is what it looks like once I've got it out. This would be the client drive or whatever else once I'm done. But I just wanted to give you a picture of once it's done and it's clear. This is the spindle, and it's still got the platters mounted to it. It's still got the spacer on it. And so our goal is to basically have this client drive, this preserved in the process. So I'm going to go through those steps so that you can see that, and that's what we're going to try to do is get it out and then put it back in. Now, this pretty picture that you're looking at, that is this is basically the coils that are wrapped around the metals. Now, what IBM calls this thing itself is called the stator, S-T-A-T-O-R.
Okay.
It's the stator, and basically it changes the state of your spinning. So when you apply a voltage in one direction, it spins one direction. You apply the voltage in the reverse direction, it spins in the reverse direction. And it's very similar to, and Platters never spin in the reverse direction, so that would never happen or should never happen.
Right.
This is very similar to the way a speaker works. So when you actually see the coil on a speaker, this is the same idea. When a voltage is applied to it, it actually causes it to vibrate based on the magnet that's surrounding it. And so that vibration then causes the cone to vibrate and make sound. Well, in this case, it's just going to cause resistance in the opposite direction of the magnets, causing it to spin.
Right.
And so that's how the platters actually spin. This is the component that's necessary to make that actually happen. So the stator rises above the top of the platform of the bottom of the drive. And you'll notice before, when we actually were looking at the punch that we're going to punch out through the top of the drive,
yeah,
that has a ring around the top. And that ring happens to be just about the right size to fit over the top of the stator.
Right.
So basically, I'm going to use that drive as a catch. So this is what I'm doing. I'm taking a bad one, and I'm just banging the crap out of it to get the centerpiece out. So that's just a hammer and a punch tool. Once I've actually knocked it free, you'll see, so it had epoxy, and basically that center hole is the exact same size of what the spindle bearings are themselves. And so I've knocked this one free, and then the next slide, you'll see, now it's free and clear, and it's just sitting there. Now I've got to take the center pin out. So I basically have to punch the center pin to get this thing free. So hit the next slide. So what I've done is I said, well, look, I got to have an area I can hold this thing so that when I push down on the Arbor Press, that the punch can punch it through, and I've got to have a way to catch it. And I don't have anything sitting around the Arbor Press that's the same size. What I figured out is if I took the bottom of the drive, so this is the bad drive that I just beat the crap out of. If I took the bottom of the drive, and I just basically took like a drywall knife or something like that and put it in the hole, I could twist it and make the hole just a little bit bigger. So that basically it's big enough for the bearings to fall through. And you see that ring, there's a silver ring around the outside edge of that right now?
Yes.
Basically the ring that's on the bottom of the drive, where the magnets and everything are the same exact size. And so I can put them on top of here, and it's suspended. It basically isn't touching the platter or doing any damage to the platter. So I can flip the platters over and have a hole that's a little bit bigger, and I can press it out.
Wow.
So if you go forward, you'll see I'm pressing it out. I'm making sure it's big enough for me to be able to slide one through. And so I had an extra one at this point to actually size it, and I'm just showing you that it's sized. But we're actually getting this out of the junk drive in order to make what I have in my hand.
Right. I see.
So this is basically what I'm doing now. I'm taking it. You can see on the bottom of the drive, and I'm wearing gloves. Basically, I'm going to put it over the middle of this drive, and then I'm going to use the Arbor Press, which is basically that metal piece that's sitting above it that you actually see in the slide right now.
Okay.
So this is what it looks like now. I'm sitting on the bottom of a drive, flipped upside down, and I've got it on my press. And I basically have a post that I bought. There's about a whole set of them was like $30. It wasn't a big deal. And I'm basically going to punch it through, and then you can advance to the next slide.
Okay.
And it basically will fall out of the bottom, and I'll have this particular piece. Now my problem is that getting one out, it'll still have this post on it. The post will still be sticking out. And for the one that I want to use as a regular tool in order to continue to remove all of my spindle motors and all of the fluid bearings in the future,
right,
I didn't want that nipple sticking off the top of it, basically.
Right.
The little post that's sticking out. So I got a cheap saw, basically. If you continue forward. Now you can use a hacksaw or you can use whatever. You just need to make it very smooth. So we're going to cut off the end of that so that we actually have one smooth chunk of metal. Now, I used a $25 saw I got at Arbor Press, basically, that had a vise and everything already attached to it. If you hit next, you'll see the one I used. So this is what I used. It was $25. It had a little vise, and it had a circular saw on it with a safety button. And so basically, I could cut this little piece off and smooth it out all in one fell swoop. So I just kind of put it up against it and butt up against it and then smoothed it out. And so once I had it smoothed out, you'll see now it fits perfectly over the bottom of a drive in that same exact space.
Right.
And so I could use this to push out using the Arbor Press. I could now push the other platters out. So at this point, I've got a way to push it out. This is basically my tool set. I'm using 2 drives now basically for mine because I have a drilled out hole in one and a spacer for the other. You can use one. You could actually get it done with just one drive. And also, I'm also adding a caliper in here. Now, a digital caliper, this one was about $15 at Arbor Press. Basically, I'm going to use it for some measurements. But my current problem is I needed a way to catch the platters as they're falling out of the bottom of the drive. I needed something they could sit in. I just couldn't put it up on the Arbor Press, or they would be touching the Arbor Press itself. Excuse me, causing problems with the platters falling because I didn't want to hurt the client's data. So if you advance forward, you'll see what I basically found is that if I took another drive and I dremeled out the area around it so that the platters and the spacers would match, that basically I could take 2 clamps, put it on each end, and set them over each other and put it up on the Arbor Press. And when I push it out, they will fall down directly into the drive below it in the same exact place.
Get out of here.
And the stator, basically that stator that was the top of the motor, would actually push against the top of the platters in that silver spindle location right in the middle. And it would keep the platters from touching anything. It would basically fall right down on top of the stator. And so if you hit the next button, you'll see that basically see on the left-hand side, see where the hook now comes out from the spacer on the motor itself from the platters there?
Yep.
So it's in reverse because you can see where it used to be on the right. See the one on the right?
Right.
So now this is upside down. And so basically I dremeled down enough so that when it sits in there, it just falls right into place. And that kind of helps it stay without touching anything else in the drive. So the platters are still suspended in the middle without touching any other metal. So it was kind of amazing that they just kind of all fit together in opposite order correctly.
It's very amazing, actually.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. You can Dremel. I did have to use a Dremel to kind of Dremel out some of the areas so it matched exactly.
Right.
But when you're doing it on your practice drive, and so initially you're trying to get all these parts in the first place, so you're just going to use 1 or 2, dummy or cheap drives and bang them out in the exact shape that you need. Basically, they're caught. So, and since I'm using a 1-ton press and not a 2-ton or a 3-ton or something else, when it breaks free just enough to hit the top of the stator without it causing, any damage, and without, the discs aren't pummeling through the bottom of the drive or anything like that, like it would on a 2-ton press or something.
No, it's quite amazing so far.
Yeah. So now this is what happens. So basically, it falls down, and the bottom of the drive with the stator is holding up the top of the drive upside down. And so I'm just showing you a photo there where that's the case.
And you could just pick it up with gloves like that? And
now I am touching, and keep in mind some of these are development pictures, I'm touching the outside, just the flat outside edges of the platters.
Right.
Now, I'm not getting fingerprints or oil or grease, so certainly with a good enough pair of gloves, you're okay. I really could use the spacers themselves. These spacers go all the way around the outside edge of the platters.
Right.
And I could use the spacers to handle most of the stuff. But if you are going to touch the platters, make sure you're wearing gloves and there's, smooth and clean, and you're only touching these outside edges.
And it won't hurt the alignment either, huh?
No, at this point in time, they're all still mounted. I didn't remove any screws from the top of the spindle and the platters themselves. So there is no change in alignment. They are all held on by pressure and the screws that are still in their original locations.
Wow. This is awesome.
Yep. Yeah. So if you hit next, now you'll see I've done this. I'm doing the animation now. I've captured this thing. And now basically this is where I've drilled this hole out in this extra drive in the bottom. And I'm basically flipping this over. Now you do have to be, you have to basically have 2 areas to do this in. You got to have like your hard, dirty area and your clean area where when you're finally handling the platters that are the client's platters, that you're doing it in the cleanest area possible. So, maybe not necessarily a clean room. It's great to have a clean room if you guys have one. I have one, and you can mount an Arbor Press in the clean room, and then that way you can keep everything clean in that area while you're working on it. But if you don't have one, that doesn't mean that you're done. You can still do the same thing, just making sure that you've used, some sort of a good clean blown air. And you're going to clean off the entire area, make sure that there's as little dust as possible. And your biggest problem isn't dust itself. Your biggest problem is probably that you're going to poke it with a piece of metal, or you're going to let the drift fall off and it's going to hit the platters. So you got to be really careful about that, making sure that that doesn't happen, and practice enough that you know that you're not going to do that.
Right.
And the little metal fragments, if any touched it at all, you can blow it off with air. Make sure that you try to keep it clean. After a little bit of practice, it'll go fine, and you won't have that problem. But you do have to do it a few times before you're kind of used to it.
Okay.
And then you hit next. So now I'm basically to the spot where I need to do this again. I'm going to do the exact same process again on a working drive, but not the client drive, so that I can remove the spindle motor. And I'm going to take it out, obviously not cutting off the post that's sticking out, because I need that for this drive. So this is now basically another good working drive that I'm going to remove that with. Now, once you've actually removed it and you've done that process twice, and so you've got a working motor, a working bearing, and you're going to replace it in the bottom of your client drive, you're going to need to take measurements. So this particular device is called a caliper, and I'm using a digital caliper. Now, a lot of people use the end, where it looks like two forks down at the end, and you're going to measure between things. I'm not going to do that. I'm measuring height. So on the bottom, you see that pin that's basically sticking out the bottom of the caliper?
Yeah.
That pin still gives you a reading and a measurement on the digital caliper on the top. And so I'm going to use that to actually do my measurements of depth. Now, the reason I'm going to do measurements is two reasons that I found mainly. One is none of the spindle bearings are exactly the same depth from drive to drive. When they're making them, they align them according to whatever the manufacturing process was for that particular drive.
Okay.
So they're at different heights. So if you hit next, you'll see what I mean. So this one, the bearings themselves are almost flush with the bottom of the drive.
Right.
So I'm measuring this with that pin sticking out basically on the bottom to make sure, how far I am or how far off I am. Now in the next picture, you'll see this particular spindle bearing was a lot lower.
Sure.
So this one's further in. So on your client drive, on the one you're replacing, you need to get the spindle to be in the bearings to be in the exact same location. So you have to basically measure your client drive and write that stuff down. And then make sure that when you're putting it back together, you're going to use this Arbor Press to push the thing back in, and you're going to jiggle it back into place from the top and the bottom again. But you need to get it at the same height. I have found that you can be off by 0.3, basically 0.3 of a millimeter. That's how far you have to be off. So you have to be really close to accurate. 0.3 of a millimeter is where you want to be. If you're varying by much more, because if it, you can vary a little bit, but
yeah.
That's typically what I'm shooting for, is 0.3 of a millimeter for this to be right. And then the heads will realign and the platters will realign. Everything will be fine.
You don't have to re-epoxy anything, do you?
I do sometimes. You don't really have to do it to actually get the data off, but it's a good idea to epoxy it. Basically, if you have one that's loose that doesn't fit exactly right, I'll show you in a minute. It's on another slide. But
okay.
Now, this particular time, I'm actually using the caliper. I decided to start measuring the heads themselves. If you hit the next slide, you'll see. Basically, what I'm doing now is before. Now, obviously this talk is primarily about the bearings themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I've given plenty of other talks that were about head replacements and replacing the heads themselves.
Right.
Well, what I'm doing here though is I'm improving the process of removing the heads and putting them back on. I have two dashes, two dashes look like negative signs in red on this arm right here.
Yes.
So what I've done is right at the point where I've backed it off of the edge of the platter, I've lined up my caliper and I took a measurement and I wrote it down on the first line, and then I took one a little bit further down on the second line, and I note where I put the caliper and how far down it was that I pointed. This way it's level. And then this way when I put the head assembly back in after replacing the platters, that I can re-put it back into the exact same location that it was in. And as long as I put the platters and the height of the spindle motor, the spindle bearings, back in at the exact same height, then they will measure out. So I need to keep these aligned and those aligned in order for the whole thing to go back together correctly.
Jeez.
Yeah. So now I'm actually going through the process, break it out again. You can hit the next slide. Now I'm using these clamps. It is very important that if you're going to use the second drive as your base drive on the bottom, that you level things off, that you actually get a level and level them off, and that you clamp them together on both sides so that the two drives don't slide. If they slide, you stand a chance of doing damage to the drive.
And they have to be in the exact same position, exactly on top of each other.
Yes, otherwise the spacers and the stuff won't fall through correctly, right? So that's what I'm doing. I'm basically lining them up, and I did start using a clamp on the other end from end to end. So I've got one more clamp now that I normally use from end to end to keep them aligned.
I see.
And then I'll punch it out with the Arbor Press at this point. Now this is the client drive. This is where it now has fallen in upside down, and I'm actually showing I'm removing the top drive. Now the top drive is going to be what I'm going to put back together because the top drive is the actual client's original components, taking the measurement. And then I'm punching through with a drift, and I'm again punching out that center piece so I can get rid of the crappy one. And this is basically the Arbor Press or a mask of the Arbor Press that I'm using. Again, like a $45 Arbor Press. Now this picture is a little bit weird because you're actually seeing the reflection of the bottom of the Arbor Press back up in the Arbor Press. So the platters are actually still there. The whole ring is still there. I'm putting the center bearings back into the center of a platter. And I'm basically trying not to put too much pressure on it. I'm putting just enough to push it down a little bit so I can take the measurement. I need to take
this is a very deceiving shot because it's a mirror. The platters are basically being okay. I see it.
Right, it's a mirror and it's reflecting back from the other side. So where you see the center and there's a line, that's actually now where the mirror starts and then begins to shoot up.
All right,
so
I cut you off. Sorry.
That's okay. So basically, I'm slowly pushing the spindle bearings back into the cap, and I need to get them the same height too. You actually have to take the measurement from the top of the platters themselves also on how high up the pin is that's sticking through the top of the cap. Usually it's pretty flush, but it's not always flush. But, keep in mind when you're putting this back in, you're going to be pressing it back in with the Arbor Press. You need to make sure that those measurements are the same. So you're going to have to keep turning it over until you wiggle it back into the exact same height that it was supposed to be.
That's crazy.
Yep. Okay. And then this is just the long shot from the side. So you can actually see that that's what I'm doing. I'm actually pressing it back in that particular location.
Okay.
And taking measurements again to make sure that I get it back in the right place. And then I've been using the super glue epoxy. This epoxy sets pretty quick, and it's been powerful enough that that I could break it out again with using the Arbor Press and its component. But this is strong enough to keep it in place so that it spins and doesn't cause the motor to spin or move on its own.
You put the epoxy in after you put the pin in.
You can put the epoxy in at the same time. You basically can put one drip on the inside ring, and as soon as you're putting it back in, it's going to start to set. So you have to be careful to go ahead and get your alignment right. Or I've been doing it okay on the bottom after it's done, basically filling the entire crevice and trying to hold the epoxy there. It's okay. It's not as perfect as it would be if there was a drop on the inside when I squeezed it in.
Gotcha.
But it's not as hard to manipulate back into place.
I see.
So that was pretty much it. That was pretty much the overview of my development process. I'll smooth things out, and I'll have a little bit better documentation and grooves and stuff cut out maybe. There's always a chance maybe I'll mill some parts or something and sell something cheap or whatever. But basically for $100 and stuff that you can find at your local store, you could get this job done. And so data recovery companies could do this without too much effort. It's certainly maybe if you want to go buy a more expensive tool or you want to spend $6,000 on one little tool to do this process, then that's always an option too.
Well, if it's between doing that and $6,000, yeah, do your method. But that's hardcore. I mean, I'm gonna definitely, guys who are listening to this anyway, I'm gonna put this video up on the site. So just go to thepodnuts.com and go to the actual page. I'll have this whole video up if you want to watch the animations and the slides along with Scott saying it. And also, you could go to myharddrivedied.com, which is Scott's site, and it's under presentations.
These slides will be under presentations. I have not added them yet. They will be any day now. So by the time you go there, they're going to show up under recent content and talks under the presentation tab.
Yeah.
And
So if anybody's listening, don't worry about not following along if you didn't have video, because I'll have either have it up on my site, but if you want more high res, you know, when Scott gets his up, you can watch him in better res. But at least I'll have my video up for whatever.
Yep. And I do have the actual Shmoocon video that I did this weekend, and that will be going up also, and that'll go up on YouTube, and that'll make its way. The slides, the projector was really dark, so on those slides you won't be able to see them as well, but you can. I'll have the Flash actual content up, and people can download it and play it on their own and use the animations or whatever they want, so that's fine.
Yeah, man, I think that's cool. I bet a lot of people are going to watch this and be like, wow, that looks really tough, but I've done projects like that, man. I think that's really fun. I can't imagine the sense of satisfaction you would get after actually fixing the bearing on these drives. I mean, it's got to be killer.
It's certainly been a learning adventure, and I really like, the educational component is very important to me. And so understanding more about fluid bearings, I've read a lot of white papers and gone through a lot of the IBM content and the patents and stuff. And I was quite impressed that every single little thing I find out about a hard drive everywhere has a tremendous amount of math behind it. And there's about 6 or 7 pages of math just showing how pressure actually works and how the fluid bearings actually work. And, most people just thought, well, it's a post and there's some fluid in there, big deal. But, those grooves and the way that they're cut and the math behind it is pretty phenomenal. And when you start reading the papers and the people that have designed it and the patents, I'm very impressed with that, and I enjoy teaching those components and adding that to my class. So I do have, to mention that I do have a class coming up in March 7th through 11th in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And so it's about half full right now, and I will be adding some of this content, and I try to keep discussing the new things in my new class material. So this stuff will be there. So anybody who wants to learn this process and do this process, I'm trying to scale so that this kind of content makes it in, because I constantly develop stuff. I'm constantly trying to add things in.
Yeah,
and
I think it's great.
That's the goal, is to educate people.
Sure, I think it's awesome. And the more methods you could find for $100, it's affordable. You know what I mean? More methods you could find to do stuff like that's really valuable.
I think so. I'm happy to help and do everything I can, and that's that hacker mentality I have. I'll buy the right equipment and I'll spend the money if necessary. It probably would have behooved the people that actually made this, $6,000 tool to try to work with me to actually, have me display it and show people, and, maybe would have driven more people in their direction to actually buy it. But the hacker in me basically says, look, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's a number of different ways you can produce a tool.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be this one particular way. And so my way works, and it actually will get the job done, and it'll get smoother as you practice, and maybe I'll find other parts that actually fit in better. But for $100, you kind of can't beat it.
I agree. Now that $6,000 tool, if you use that, I can't imagine the process being much easier than what you showed with that tool, is it?
I've never actually seen the tool or seen what the parts and the pieces are. They've been very, it's a black art. We're going to hide everything and not tell anybody.
Yeah.
My understanding is, just from hearing about the tool, is that there's some parts that are milled out, and so they have specific specs for their milled out parts, so that instead of maybe doing all these measurements and things that I'm having to do, which I don't consider to be a lot. I mean, it generally takes about 5 minutes for me to figure out the measurements, put it down, and then try to go back and forth. But I think that they've got a sizer and some out parts that are done in advance. But my understanding is you still have to go get an Arbor Press. You still have to, get your, the air and your clean area and your clean room and all the other stuff that would go with it. But the only thing that they've done is created a milled out, basically the same thing I'm using for the bottom spacer to punch it out with the Arbor Press. They've made one that was, mass manufactured or something, instead of taken from another drive and then, sanded down.
Not worth $6,000, if you ask me.
Yeah, probably not. No.
All right, we got some emails here. And let's go over these, and I'll start reading the emails, and I think at last show I didn't delete the ones that we already went over. So if we start going over some repeats, let me know, Scott, and we'll stop.
All right.
But this one I know is new. This is from Paul. He says, Scott and Steve, I was wondering why after remapping sectors with MHDD on a Hitachi laptop drive, it did not increase its reallocated sector count in Smart, even after a power cycle. I'm starting to suspect other makes also do not update this value. So under normal use, would a remapping only occur during a format or during a write also?
I think it's a little bit kind of it's going to be hard for me to answer this question exactly in an easy method because when I'm comparing stuff, I actually am using a very high-end tool that would display the actual tables instead of just the smart data. The smart data is reliant upon a feature that reaches a threshold and causes it to error out and that threshold. So if, in other words, the head tries to read and write 10 times to a particular sector, that would cause the threshold to be exceeded. And when that threshold is exceeded, then it will actually go to the smart table. When you're actually forcing it to get rid of slow sectors and doing that, I don't know that MHDD is making that same change, that it's actually causing this error to occur in that particular region that would cause it to update, or maybe Smart isn't reflecting it correctly.
Huh.
There's a couple of situations there. But I would actually have to go through looking at like a PC3000, pull the table, compare what MHDD did, what Smart did, and try to align those three. So maybe if he has one of the tools that can actually pull the real glist table and look at it and see whether or not that was reflected in those changes, that would make sense. I believe the table is obviously updated, and so therefore, once those sectors are killed, that they're moved to the relocated table. You can usually tell by running a timing test. When you run a timing test, or if you just ran MHDD on a scan, the sectors that you would have thought you would actually get a longer delay process in for them to read because they'll take more than 6 milliseconds or 7 milliseconds as they go to this relocated table and then return from it. There's also another tool called Bonnie++, and there's a tool in it called zcav, and that's a Linux tool, and zcav will actually display a numeric table which will show you how long it takes to read those sectors and where the zones are, basically, if it has to go to another zone to read it. So it's a difficult question for me to answer, not knowing his exact information and his exact thing. But my guess is that there is something that's going on there, but that Smart hasn't hit the threshold. Smart may not be updating correctly based upon that, and that's probably true of most drives. Manufacturers don't like for Smart to update great amounts of time because it'll tell somebody that basically you have a drive that's under warranty and it'll cost us more money to replace it. So manufacturers try to not update Smart if it's not necessary under certain conditions. And that may be the case here with not hitting that threshold value. Smart doesn't get triggered.
I see. Now that data should definitely help them. But thanks for the email, Paul. This one's from Larry. He says, he's got 4 parts here. Number 1, is it better to let drives sleep, spin down during idle times, or keep them running all the time? I've heard arguments both ways on this debate, but never any conclusion supported by facts. That's a good question. I'm curious about that too. What do you say?
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, that them spending down and not running all the time is probably better. It's better from a wear and tear perspective. However, Seagate hard drives, this is actually that firmware problem that basically gets triggered when they actually get when they spin down and they have to wake back up.
Yeah.
And if it rereads the reallocation tables and stuff like that, that's where this firmware problem will cause a problem, and the drive won't come back. And that basically the firmware bug is triggered, causing a problem that stops you from being able to read from the drive. So, generally speaking, I think that you're safe. It lowers the temperature, it lowers, a lot of wear and tear on the drive. Heads aren't flying over the platter, so it's wearing them down less. Although you've got that 5 to 10 second wait time that you're waiting for the drive to come back. That's kind of the most, annoying thing out of all of it. But, in some cases, you don't even get a choice. Recently, Western Digital upgraded some software to allow you to change the time at which these things go to sleep. But overall, you don't normally have there definitely wasn't any changes for a while that you could actually affect that it's going to sleep on its own, whether or not you wanted it to or not on the green drives and the things like that. So that's kind of the difference between some of the enterprise editions and the green drives and the low end drives, is that you didn't have the ability to change this, or that they went to sleep more often. Enterprise drives, they think they're in a RAID array or they're in a server or something, and so they don't typically spin down. They just continue to run.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I'm always of the frame of mind. If I'm not using something, I don't want it on. So
Well, the old thing that actually happened was, like the idea with radios and tubes and TVs is that the worst thing for a electronics device is when you turn it on and that power surge surges through the system.
right.
And so that's why light bulbs blow at that time. That's why, tubes and TVs blew, things like that, is that power surge that passes through it is the worst thing. Now, typically we've got capacitors, we've got conditioning, we've got other things that are involved. Most of your systems are fairly safe by comparison, but again, we're still dealing with power and fluctuations and things that can cause damage. And if you got a cheap power supply, it's certainly not going to be good for the device.
So
So
that still applies then, putting the first jolt of power through it.
yeah, generally speaking, I would say that that's probably still the most detrimental thing to the device is the second that you apply power to it, that surge that happens when it goes through
Huh,
everything.
interesting.
But generally speaking, I would say that wear and tear on the drive and how much it's running. It's kind of like if I had my car and it ran all the time, even when I was in the house. Well, certainly the pistons and the engine and everything are going to get more worn out than they would otherwise. So
Yeah.
you're probably a lot safer from a standpoint of it spinning down and not going to sleep, or going to sleep instead of
Right.
not running on its own.
All right, sounds good. Number two, from a mechanical perspective, is it preferable to mount a drive horizontally or vertically? Some manufacturers' cases provide for mounting in either direction.
I think for the most part, it doesn't really matter today. The big deal is, as I just described with fluid bearings, there's going to be some pressurized stuff and there's going to be some changes. But, the drives typically are sturdy enough to run in almost any of those positions, upside down, sideways, whatever. They don't like to be moved while they're running. That typically does affect the drive. And you can see, we've done a lot of things even with like vibration sensors and stuff where you can actually see, like if I knock on the table, you'll actually see the drive actually vibrate. Or if I yell at the drive, there's a video out of a guy yelling at a radar array, and it actually makes waves as you're yelling at it. You can actually see that the vibrations are causing an effect to the drive.
Wow.
And that was pretty well known. It's actually always kind of been around. I actually can show that, and I do in my class sometimes where I'll actually show like the accelerometers and stuff and what's actually happening. And then if you just kind of move it around and wave it around a little bit while you're doing it, or even knock the table, you'll get a pretty bad influx of vibration. But the big thing now is that there's little metal fragments that are on the platters. Sometimes things happen, little metal pieces come off or whatever, and they get flung around the tray. There's air pressure, and basically it pushes the little metal fragments back behind this filter. And there's a filter that sits sideways in the drive, and it captures this content outside the edge of the platters. Well, the problem is that if you change the orientation with a lot of content behind it that's stuck in the filter, if anything is of any substantial size, it might fall back down inside the drive. And so when that happens, it might get stuck between a head or something else like that when the drive starts back up, causing damage. So that's why, like old servers, if you don't back them up before you move them, it might be the last time you ever saw the data. So those are the kind of things that you want to look out for. But generally speaking, horizontal, upside down, whatever, things are at least the spindle component is pressurized internally, so it doesn't affect the fluid, and the heads already fly a certain height based on air pressure off the platters, so that's really not affected. So that's the worst thing that can possibly happen is maybe some fragments fall out of the drive.
Awesome. It's good to know. Number three, while I realize he doesn't support SpinRite for data recovery, what does Scott think about running SpinRite periodically for maintenance purposes just to keep the surfaces refreshed? Would it be harmful in any way?
It's only harmful in the fashion that if something bad did happen, I mean, keep in mind that this tool is picking up data, looking at the data, trying to put the data back down, refreshing the surface, which in some instances a little bit what happens when you defrag a hard drive in a much smaller sense. But I think that basically that's what SpinRite's purpose is for, is a maintenance situation where there may not be any bad sectors, or at that point in time that maybe it's something that's on the edge and it refreshes that content. I just think it's detrimental or dangerous to try to do something like that without a backup or knowing anything, but you'll probably run into a problem or the same problem that SpinRite might have run into at the same time. Keep in mind that SpinRite touches every sector on the platter as it goes across the drive. So if there is a damaged sector, or there is something bad, or there's physical damage where a head might be, it may cause it to dig in on the platter, causing more substantial damage.
I see.
But generally speaking, as a maintenance tool, I have no problem with SpinRite from that perspective. I'm just adamant that maybe you should make sure that your data is online, backed up, or you've got something that's going someplace. Sooner or later, it might fail, and then you have nowhere to go.
Right. Good point. Last part. Oops. Sorry, I shifted your video there. Here we go. Has hard drive quality decreased over the years? Seagate drives formerly carried a 5-year warranty, which has been reduced to 3 years. Is this indicative of overall quality, i.e., they don't make them like they used to?
Yep, I agree. I agree that I think drives are made a lower quality today. I think what's happened basically is in this race to, first thing is, they're in a race to get the cheapest drive out there. I mean, if you really think about it, if you look at the parts and the work that went into making a 2 terabyte drive for, $55 or whatever, that it's worth a lot more than $55. So surprisingly enough, probably if you just add up the parts, it might be close to being more than $55 worth of stuff for that space. I think that they're using lower grade memory. They're not baking it as long as they used to. You have more degenerative parts that are not going to keep up with it. And certainly there has been a change in the way the technology works that has been written to the drive. So in the old days, let's say the 90s being the old days, drives were written with an MR head. And that magnetic resisto head basically is writing in a longitudinal fashion on the drive. That content is a little easier for those heads to read, and the drive is a little more robust. However, it was also more expensive. So, if you spend, $300 on a drive that's a 40 gig drive, you're expecting it to work longer periods of time. Well, you wouldn't have had 40 gigs in the 90s. That you're not looking at 40 gigs until 2001 or so.
Right.
But roughly speaking, you had differences in quality in memory and boards and technology and what has actually been used over that time. Then you have today, you have this race to create the cheapest generic piece of junk by the lowest manufacturer in China. Chips and the quality are rushed, and there's not a lot of testing time. If you really look at even like our progression to what's called perpendicular recording, which all the drives currently use, it was released in 2006. The first actual books and technology that I read on it coming into play in hard drives was in 2004. So they actually went from there to production and out the door. Now, I'm not saying that was the entire time that it was actually produced before it got there, but I can't imagine that they had a large period of time to actually test it before it actually went out the door.
Oh, no.
So,
2 years? Come on.
Yeah, at best, if that. I mean, they're in a hurry to get it out the door. And that's kind of the situation that we're finding more and more. And that's the difference between enterprise drives. Enterprise drives are made with higher quality electronics, the things that have been baked longer, and that's why they cost more. That's also why SCSI drives cost more. Their reliability factor is a little bit higher, and the quality of the equipment and what they're actually using is a better quality.
Right.
So, you go buy a $50 drive, that's what you're going to get is a $50 drive. You buy 2 of them so you can back up on it. Maybe you should buy 3 of them so that you can do it in triple redundancy. But yeah.
I just bought 2. I don't know what you're buying drives for, but I was kind of proud of myself. Bought 2 drives over at CompUSA the other day, 2 terabyte SATA drives for $79 each.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's a good deal. Good.
Yeah.
The sales flyer said $99 each, but when I paid for them, it came up as $79. So
wow.
I said, "Are you sure that's right?" And he said, "Yeah, that's right." So
maybe that's why CompUSA is going out of business. No, just kidding.
It's basically a Tiger Direct.
I know. I'm kidding. That was a joke.
All right. Next email. We've covered this before, but let's just do it again, just for the heck of it. Not this exact email, but this question. One question for the hard drive guru, Scott Moulton. What program for data recovery or to recover data or files that have been overwritten would you suggest? The internet is not helping make it clear which one is the best. The list of, quote, good ones I found for what I think is, and she lists, or it's Jan. I don't know if it's Jan as a guy or girl, in Italy. He says, Digital Rescue Premium, Advanced Disk Recovery, Recover My Files, Data Recovery Wizard, and Get Data Back is the list he dug up. But what do you think, Scott?
Well, if I understand what you just read me, it said overwritten files.
Yeah, yes.
If you overwrote the data, it is not recoverable with any software. Period. It's overwritten. Therefore, in that magnetic space, there is now something else.
Okay.
So deleted and overwritten are two different things. So deleted files, basically, there is still residual space on the drive that includes that content. And so from that standpoint, it would be recoverable by searching the drive by what's called headers. Basically, there's a string at the front of a file and the end of a file that basically say, I am a file, here I am, go get me. Or, certain instances where like the MFT in Windows, master file table, contains data that shows that something else was deleted but still exists on the drive. So in those cases, I typically run Get Data Back or RStudios are two of the major packages that I use from that standpoint. You could also use some free tools like Scalpel or Foremost to get the job done. Basically searching for those headers. There's another one that's called, Test Disk. It basically has a program that goes with it. It's called PhotoRec. And PhotoRec is a fantastic little application that they've added a lot of headers from a lot of file names. It doesn't just recover photos at this point, it recovers other content. But, to kind of end that discussion, if it's overwritten, if I actually overwrote the file with something or I used a pattern wiping tool and overwrote it, it's gone. Yeah, there's no way to recover that data.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, Jan, but thank you for the email. William writes in, and you last show you were talking about backup software that you were liking and testing and stuff.
Yeah,
online. Back. We had some guys, and William's one of them, who loves CrashPlan. He says CrashPlan rules. I can max my upstream connection with it.
Right.
So what?
Well, I really haven't tried CrashPlan. It's one of the ones that's kind of on my list to go back and double check kind of thing. The thing with CrashPlan, the way I understand it, is basically it kind of makes all of your machines kind of a RAID array. Basically, it distributes your content across all your machines, and all your machines basically become your backup devices wherever they're at. And I probably need to spend a little time going back and doing that. But over Christmas and then doing the research for this particular talk, I didn't have time to cover that again. I've been really happy with Dropbox, just from a standpoint of I have 10 machines that it basically syncs and redistributes all my data back to, but I am limited to 100 gigs on their current plan. So, but pumping 100 gigs is pretty tough anyway.
Right. So you're still using Dropbox then?
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of Dropbox. I think it's a great way. I mean, it makes a folder on your drive. You put your stuff in there, and you don't even have to pay attention to it from that point. It will automatically duplicate whatever files are in there to whatever other machines that you have the same account for Dropbox installed on. So I use, I have a development Mac. I have a Mac that I use when I'm actually traveling. That's kind of a blank Mac that, if it gets seized at the airport or something like that, that there's no company data on. And I use that one for, projects that I'm projecting or doing talks at cons and things like that. And basically I can work at something on my desk, hop up, hit the road, and then it syncs to my laptop when I get to the hotel. I don't have to worry about it. And it tends to work extremely well without me having to pay any attention to it.
Yeah, I'm a fan too. I mean, I use PogoPlug, and I got that, and I've been using that for a while, but I use PogoPlug in conjunction with Dropbox. They're both really cool.
Right.
Okay, this one is from Simon. I think we read this one, but see if this refreshes your memory. He says, "Hey, Steve, I took Scott's class, and I loved it. I had a couple of questions for next time you have him on. I usually use my DeepSpar DDI for recovery, but occasionally I hook up damaged drives to my write blocker, and that unit is firewalled to an XP box. I wondered, does FireWire see the full ATA command set, or am I better off just hooking up through SATA or IDE? FireWire is pretty convenient and fast for scanning." Let's see. I'll read the second part. I'm not sure if it's related to the first. I had an SAS drive recovery recently. Wondered if there's any advice you could give on dealing with their interface. I've heard there are several different types, and the interface does not work with many of the recovery tools I have. Are there adapters that can be used with these types of drives? Okay, it looks like second question, two questions, but that's from Simon.
Right. Okay. So the first part of that is one more time. What was just hit it again real quick?
Yeah, I usually use my DeepSpar DDI for recovery, but occasionally I hook up damaged drives to my write blocker, and that unit is firewalled to an XP box.
So on the FireWire side, FireWire is a little bit more featured than the USB or the USB devices. However, the devices that typically support them are limited in their capabilities anyway. So in other words, if you're using a write blocker, whatever the commands and the control that you have for that particular write blocker are probably the same commands and control. Your problem with a write blocker is that it is basically software that's emulated, that's running inside of a write blocker. When a bad block comes across or bad sectors come across, if it doesn't get what it's expecting, then basically the write blocker can crash and lock up on its own as well. It's kind of a software in a box that prevents you from writing to the disk. And so there are times where you have a weird size or you've got some damaged area that the write blocker itself will lock up. But you are better off probably using FireWire, especially for the throughput, or eSATA, which then you're looking at a different write blocker or something along those lines, and you would get more throughput than you would through USB, and the capability a little bit more robustly. FireWire supports more native commands and as a more robust command set than USB is from that standpoint. Now on the SAS side, really you're kind of stuck on the SAS side. You really have to use the basic controller that supports SAS. There's not really converters and things like there is to go from SATA to SAS or whatever. I know that there's a lot of things out there that basically say I can use a converter from a SAS to a SATA, but it's not in that way. It's not for SAS drives. It's basically for like a bridge that it uses for a connector, but it's not to support the device or the drive command itself. So when I'm doing recovery on a SAS device, I actually have to have it controlled by a SAS controller and trying to image it and do that whole thing. Your problem is most of the time SAS drives are coming out of a RAID array, and so you've got to treat them individually and then bind them all together anyway. Excuse me. Right. So you do have to still go through the process of imaging every single drive and doing the standard recovery. But on the flip side, SAS and SCSI is a more robust protocol than what we're using for IDE and SATA.
Right. Good. Very good. Let me read. Actually, that's it for the voicemails. That's it for the emails. I have one voicemail. Hang on, Scott. I got to stop the recording here for 1 sec and record the voicemail. Okay, unmute that. Let me just make sure it plays properly, and then we will start the recording again.
Hello, Steve. This is Door Geek. I had a couple questions for Scott, and my hard drive died. Well, first thing, I just asked Scott to not count crash plan out.
Okay, one more test here.
Hello, Steve. This is Door Geek. I had a couple questions for Scott, and my hard drive died.
Okay, and I'm going to start the recording again, and I'll play the voicemail. Could you hear that, Scott?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear it? Okay, here we go. What? Recording? What?
Nothing. I just, a lot of people want to talk about crash plan. I guess I might have to go back and look at. Okay.
All right, here we go. Here's a message from the Door Geek to Scott.
Hello, Steve. This is Door Geek. I had a couple questions for Scott, and my hard drive died. Well, first thing, I just asked Scott to not count crash plan out, partially because of its flexibility. He can set up his own master server and sync back and forth to that. If you do that and you don't pay them, it's not syncing, it's backup. If you do pay to use their service, then it is syncing. It's a very interesting product. I appreciate it because it's truly cross-platform. Second thing was SpinRite. I know I'm never going to drop it. My question to him is, how does he feel about using it for maintenance instead of recovery? The main reason I ask is I have now a 9 or 10-year-old drive, and it's still working apparently just fine.
Oh, looks like Door got cut off. But you did answer the question about SpinRite for maintenance. It's funny that two of those questions came in at the same time.
Question. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly SpinRite for maintenance. I mean, I can see that, working fine. Obviously the problem is basically it comes on a floppy or a CD or disk or whatever, and you've got to reboot your machine, run maintenance on it. It'll take a day for it to run, and then, reboot, whatever. But certainly I don't really have a problem with that. And, since the same person is talking about crash plan, I'm assuming he has a backup. So as long as he's got a backup and he's safe, then that's not a problem. I understand. My only problem with SpinRite as a whole ever is that they call it recovery software, but it doesn't recover anything. It puts it right back on the same drive.
Right.
If it was going to recover something, it should write that to a secondary drive. And so that would be fantastic if they ever enabled that so that it would write to a second drive. Then we would have at least a different way for me to talk about SpinRite. But that's a lot of people seem to be very happy and dependent upon it, but not really know exactly what it does and the damage that it can actually do. But I see it on my side. Now, as far as crash plan goes, well, I've gotten a lot of responses that say take another look. And again, I'm happy with Dropbox. I can probably use it in conjunction. I do have servers. I have a whole set of servers. I have a 24 terabyte server at the office.
24?
And I have a 24 terabyte server, RAID 6, 24 terabyte server, and I have an additional 18 terabytes or something or so on a secondary server. Jeez. And so those things are already being backed up and going out. And I've been living on Dropbox for portability of my regular files that I actually work with.
Right.
But CrashPlan has some interesting content and some things and supports all 3 platforms. And, that's it. It warrants an additional look. And so I'll take another look at it and see how well that goes.
Sounds good. All right, Scott, before we end off, why don't you tell us where people can find you or where you're going to be in the near future?
I am going to be, my next thing is going to be the class in Washington, D.C. So from March 7th to March 11th. So on myharddrivedied.com, there is a classes page, and there is a form that you can basically send me. I have basically 3 formats for my classes, and so that's basically the seated 5-day class where everyone will actually be in the class in Washington, D.C. Then I have an additional one that's following up that will be in Atlanta in April, from April 11th to April 15th. And I also sell my class in a box, basically, for the people who can't make a seated class or can't get to those locations, or they want all the tools and everything basically bundled together. It will all be in that same location. So that's called a distance learning class. And so you can find that on My Hard Drive Died or go to the store section. If you want to see a sample of the old version 1 class, there's a book up there that's basically like $20. And you can go buy it from Lulu or whatever, and it's got about 600 pages of printed material and things with it. The current book that actually goes with the current classes, which is not sold online directly, is 1,200 pages currently. So that has expanded, includes text and examples and all kinds of content, and about 160 hours of video goes on the drive with that particular class. After that, the next thing is going to be the conference, Outer Zone, and that will be on March 18th and March 19th in Atlanta. And later on this year, another person and I are putting on, with 2 other people, a conference called SkyDogCon.
Wait, say it again. You broke up a little bit.
It's called SkyDogCon.
Okay.
So SkyDogCon is the name of this other conference that we're putting together, which is, basically all the names were taken. No, SkyDog is the name of, it's a hacker conference, basically. And that's going to be actually later in the year. We're looking at October or so for that to exist. So that's basically the upcoming stuff that we're working on. That one's going to actually be in Tennessee. We're looking at Nashville, Tennessee, and renting a facility there and trying to make a con that's kind of a little similar to Shmoocon, and doing security talks and privacy talks and things like that, and kind of having a hacker environment for people to learn. And you can tell from the way that I'm doing things that, I try not to make things a secret, and they're not a black art, and I try to expand that knowledge. And so that's basically our idea behind putting together these cons, is to publish these videos and put them out there and to let people see them, and to not hide it in a corner somewhere where people don't know what's going on.
Right. Good stuff, man. Sounds exciting, very geeky. I'm sure a lot of the listeners would love it and be interested in going to some of that stuff, and interested in your kit as well.
Well, thank you. And like I said, in a couple of days, I'll have the videos from Shmoocon and the animations put up for this talk, and the talk that I did at the DoD, the Department of Defense Cybercrime Summit, is already put up on the site. It's under the current talks and current information. So that's already about 1/3 down on the presentation page. And there'll be a lot more free material put up. I pretty much put it all out there.
Sounds good. Thanks again.
Well,
thank you very much again, Scott.
Well, thanks for having me on, Steve. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime. And that is going to be it for My Hard Drive Died for this week. Thank you guys for watching, listening, streaming. Stay tuned for Linux for the rest of us coming on at 8:30. See you guys next time. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
We're still live, but we're not recording on the audio.
Yep. Well, that was a fantastic show. That was longer than usual. That's good. Well, you know, we missed last month, so that'd be good for people to have a lot of material.
That's what I figured. I mean, do all the emails, all the voicemails. It went actually the show was an hour and a half, but
awesome.
Yeah, it's over deliver.
Yeah, well, that's good. As soon as you have that link, I'll get into my new site here and post it. I'll try to put some stuff up near the top so people can see it.
Are you using Drupal 7?
Yes, I'm using the newest stuff of Drupal, but now keep in mind I have a developer who actually handled all the Drupal components themselves, and so I'm doing some maintenance and putting some stuff up myself for the blogging and the other stuff.
Yeah, no, Drupal's. I use Drupal for my site. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
you could just do so much with it.
Yeah, it's a really nice kind of, encompassed database component, and it has done a good job for, laying my stuff out. And, I do like, too, we've added all the other components where my Twitter feeds are running constantly over on the right. So if you look down towards the bottom, my Twitter stuff is always on the right. And so the track agendas, the Spybergram stuff is there. And then down at the bottom, there's actually that toolbar that's running across the bottom. You can see that there's 5 people online. You're one of them, and basically it has ways for them to share pictures and tweets and content and Facebook, my stuff. I've got the links to my YouTube videos across the bar. I need to change my photos because I have a bunch of photos of that one he linked to was actually like my kids and things like that. But I've got a component that actually has all the photos and stuff that actually go with. So those are some photos that I've taken or done in my semi-professional photography arena. But I do have like hard drive photos and a bunch of other stuff that actually goes here. So he linked to the wrong Flickr thing.
Damn, this is still pretty cool. What bar? Yeah. What did he use for that bar? That's not a custom.
There's a tool and it's called like a Wiki Bar or whatever. I paid for a year of their professional service, which allows you to add the content and the code and then join the chat and the whole thing. And it's what's the name of it begins with a W.
This is cool, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I like that it floats in place and it adds the content and the whole thing and continues to go online. Shows you. There's actually a map there that'll show you where people are joining in from. So some people are listening to you and posting it or getting on the site from, there's 7 there right now. They're coming in from, other countries, basically. You can see it in the map.
UK. If you guys go to myharddrivedied.com, you can see Scott's pictures.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those might not be there. That's a double rainbow. There was a couple. I mean, I do some semi, professional photography stuff, and these were just the ones that I actually had done conversions on and thrown up.
Sweet.
One of them that's pretty cool, if you look in the middle of the big pictures again, so that you see all the pictures, there's one that has like a floating balloon in the sky. I don't know if you saw that one. It looks like it's lit in the middle.
Let me see.
Go back.
Oops.
Because when you zoom out, it shows you all of the pictures. And then you'll see the second picture on the top row? Yeah, click on that one. So this is actually outside in, we're physically at Sony Movie Studios. I did a job at Sony Movie Studios. And so that particular picture is a balloon. They have like this helium balloon that blows up that it has lights in it. And they light the outside streets when they're going to do a music video. So one of the nights I was working there, they actually, doing some hard drive stuff, they were going to film this video, and they swapped out all the posters, pictures, and all the stuff. They came and brought trees in, and this is actually like outside in the middle between buildings, and they brought a big floating light in. And it was one of the coolest things. It looks completely fake, but it's pretty awesome. They just strap it up and had the lights out there.
Is it how is it raised? It's like a hydrogen, helium. What is it?
Yeah, yeah, it floats on its own, so it's a helium balloon probably more than likely, and
They just
it
hang.
has
They just hang
yeah,
lights from it.
no, it's like a whole balloon with the lights mounted inside the balloon or
Yeah,
something. So they light it and send it up, and then they strap it down on top of the roof there, so it just floats over the middle of the street to light it.
that is
It
freaking
was
amazing.
really weird. It was really a weird looking, yeah.
That is amazing. Unbelievable.
So so yeah, it was pretty awesome. So
Geeknician in the chat room says it's a Weebia toolbar. WIBYA.
Weebia, yeah, that's it.
Weebia. Mindmelt says, can we get a URL for that, Steve or Scott? What I caught of the show is really good, guys. Can we? Oh, yeah. As soon as I'm done recording Mindmelt, it goes right up on Justin TV as a video you can watch. Yes, there's no guests on Podnuts Daily today, so we're not going to be doing that, guys. We'll have somebody on tomorrow, though. Let's see. Okay, I think that pretty much answered the questions. You guys have any questions for Scott while we have him on the line? Just post them there in the chat room while I look at Scott's other pictures. I like Cool Iris, too. It's a neat way to show pictures.
Yeah, it's I mean, they have like plugins for that toolbar, and so basically the plugins because there's a free version and there's a pay version of the toolbar, and if you do the pay version, you can remove all their branding stuff that they had. So that's what I did was removed all their branding, and then you have plugins, and you can just choose which plugins you want, and then point it to that particular content. So obviously, like the YouTube one is a plugin, and so it all ties to the code back to their page, and there's a little embedded piece of code that you put on your page, and it'll just basically float there. So there's 100 more. I mean, you can put WordPress blogs and a dozen other things in there, and so it basically can grow or change, and all I have to do is log into their site to make the changes. So I don't have to modify the code or the content on the page or anything like that.
I see. That's great. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
It's not very intrusive either. It's just sitting down there.
Yeah, it's some people did point out, they don't necessarily like Facebook or whatever, know where they're going, but unless you actually log in when you do this stuff, I don't think it arbitrarily just knows or points it out unless you click the button. So so from that standpoint, it doesn't do anything unless you've logged in.
Let me know your reaction to it. I'm still in the I hate toolbar stage, but this is kind of different.
Well, it's a little bit different in the fact that this is specific for my content and it's not anybody else's stuff. So, they can Facebook, Twitter, look at the photos, do those things. Generally speaking, a lot of people like it because they feel that it adds a touch to the site that is again back to the social networking component. If I decide to turn it off or whatever, I do have those social networking components at the bottom of if you go to the bottom of the page, there's a gray box down there that's basically like the catalog for the site, and I have the content down there. But for the most part, I like this. I like going on and being able to tell that there's 5 people online or who's hitting the site.
Yeah.
And the translate thing is a big deal for me because I have a lot of clients that come from other places in other countries, and I don't know all of their languages, but it's fantastic that if you hit the translate bar, it just automatically will translate every page on the fly. You can switch whatever language you want. I didn't have to do any work for that, so you just pick what you want. And so if I've got people in German, then the page will be translated in German, and they can have each page.
How much is it? Yeah, this is awesome. This is really cool. How much is this thing for the professional?
The professional one was I did like $95 for a year. So like I paid in advance for a year. It's $95. So
that's not bad.
Yeah. So they have one more level up from there that's like 120 or whatever. But from that perspective, I think that it comes across really good, and it's kind of nice that as they move around on the site too, even like the translate stuff will float. You can actually continue to do that or do recent posts. But my blog entries will show up there often and things too. So
yeah, that's really cool. Okay, I'm liking it. All right, we got some questions here. Mindmelt wants to know, what is a hard drive? All right, Geeknician says, I have a WDC Raptor. I need to send it to you. It clicks. Okay, Geeknician, you know where to find them. Vash says, does Scott think spinning drives will eventually be replaced by solid-state drives?
I think that in laptops and in portable devices, yes. I think in servers and currently probably even desktops that there's no hurry to replace them. So we're probably looking at another 8 to 10 year lifespan for 3.5-inch spinning disks and server drives before we're actually headed into that. It's more likely we're going to have like a dual world where we may have like a fast boot solid state for a short period of time. But your real problem is that solid state drives, they have there's single layer, double layer, and now there's triple bit. And those basically, as they get larger, as the drive has expanded, that they are dying faster. These cells in an engineer, and I'm not talking about the stupid marketing material that they give you, an engineer will tell you flat out that in a single layer SLC chip that you can write 100,000 times to one single cell before it will die. In a dual layer, it's only 10,000 times. In a triple bit, it's only 5,000.
Really?
So when you consider that, say, a server is doing 100,000 transactions per second when they're processing, say credit cards or something like that, you're not looking at a lifespan that is livable before it has to be replaced. You're looking at great deaths in the family, basically.
How many years? How many years?
You're talking less than one on a standard solid state now. Now, understand that there are other solid state drives that are done with DRAM. And so, like, if you go to like Wachovia or Wells Fargo, whatever now it is, they have banks of solid state drives, but they're not like the ones that you're buying for your laptop or something else from that standpoint, where you're actually going to power it off. It's going to be off part of the time. It's not in use. These things do hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, but they're alive on DRAM. And so DRAM, similar to the RAM in your computer, basically, is going to live a lot longer. It doesn't have that refresh problem. Cells don't die like that. So it's going to live and survive a lot longer.
Huh.
So you don't have the exact same problem that you actually have with current solid state drives that we're putting in laptops or your iPad and your iPhone. Those things have, they're heavily software driven for the wear leveling schemes to make them survive, but they're not going to live.
You all right?
They're going to have to, we're looking at a couple of years before they've changed the technology enough that they're using some other component that doesn't have the problem. Right now, effectively, solid-state disks have been exactly the same since 1984. The same content, the same way that they're made, the silicon that they're using, all of that has been exactly the same since 1984. So until they figure out how to change that to something else so that it does not die as often, it's not going to be widely used in machines that are constantly running all the time without some sort of a fundamental change.
Good to know, especially for those of you thinking about getting one of those solid-state drives.
Yeah, they're great for laptops and iPads and iPhone. Things that also will suspend and be off. But using them for a server, which is primarily what desktops and those kind of things have been going for these days. People are using it to process data, and they're staying on all the time. You get 2 years of life out of it before it's completely dead. Of course, spinning disks these days, they're dying at 2 years too. So,
right.
Whatever. Yeah.
All right. Uncle Al says, does SpinRite work magnetically to repair a hard drive?
Magnetically. Well, basically what SpinRite does is it makes extensive use of the ECC correction component that's actually bound to the 512 bytes. So there's 512 bytes, and a sector doesn't look like what you're used to seeing a sector look like. It actually is about 591 bytes. It has a lot of extraneous data that is with it to actually compare so that you can actually have ECC that actually says this 512 bytes is okay. I have some of those things in some of my slides. If you go online and look at some of my previous presentations, I'll have some of those in there. But SpinRite basically moves the head from a couple of different directions. So it'll move forwards, backwards. Different things happen when you go backwards and forwards on a drive and you move the head to different locations. It actually comes at it at a different approach. So it's kind of like flying at a different angle. So if you did it kind of like in a helicopter, it's going to be at a different angle every time you approached it. And that's pretty much what happens with SpinRite. It says, oh, look, if I can't read this sector, let's go to the end of the drive and then come backwards, which effectively turns off cache and memory. So it's not caching ahead because you're going backwards. So there's certain functions like that that actually happen. And it has about, my understanding is 18 to 20,000 different routines that it will do over that time period to try to correct that and read that data from that particular sector if it's bad. So during its refresh pattern, basically, it's looking to see, okay, look, do I need to cause this thing to basically be a bad sector, mark it in the bad block table, skip it, put this data in a new location? So that's kind of what it's doing. Now, MHDD has some methods to do that. However, it doesn't have the extensive number of routines to cause that to happen. It has a testing routine and a make bad routine, but it does not do it 20 different ways. There is a tool called the DDI, and the DDI is a piece of hardware. It uses the same basic principles, except that it's only doing recovery. It's not making modifications to the original drive. So it's reading that content, saving it to a secondary drive. That's very important, obviously, which is what SpinWrite doesn't do. If you had damage and you couldn't read the sector, and that sector is a critical sector, if something bad happened, you may whittle down your chances of recovering the data because you've just killed it.
I see. Good answer.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's going to be it. Thank you guys in the chat room for the questions. Thank you, Scott, for answering them.
You're welcome.
I think I'm going to end off the stream now. Guys who are watching on the live stream, we're going to be back in about half an hour to do Linux for the rest of us. So if you just want to hang out, chat with each other, we'll be back in a bit. Scott, just hang on the line for 1 sec, and we'll see you guys in a little bit.